Well, on what is probably the most important Friday of the year that we celebrate as Christians, the Speaking for Him podcast, I'm Adam McNutt, alongside the host of the program, Mr. Andrew Gomison.
Hello, Adam. It is good to be with you, and it's good to be with you on this Good Friday because, as you said, it is one of the most important Fridays that we as believers celebrate, and it is one of the main reasons that Speaking for Him exists. We exist to preach Christ and Him crucified, and that's what we're going to talk about today on the Speaking for Him podcast through the power of drama, and specifically through the power of looking at the events of Good Friday as they unfolded through the eyes of Simon of Cyrene. And we'll hear from him in just a moment. But first, why don't you read for us our quote of the day?
Which comes from Mark 15:21. And they compel one Simon of Cyrene, who passed by coming out of the country, the father of Alexander, and Rufus, to bear his cross.
And that is Mark 15:21. And this is a man that we don't hear much about in the scriptures. We have, I think, 3 or 4 mentions of him, usually a couple verses long, and a slight indication in the book of Romans that his family may have joined the early church. So it is with these parameters in mind that this narrative takes place. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Simon of Cyrene.
My name is Simon, a common name for a common man. Like my father before me, I've been a blacksmith all my life. He welcomed me into his shop as a young man, and it didn't take me long to become fascinated with the work. I marveled as I watched my father's strong arms pound hot metal, and I loved watching bits, bridles, horseshoes, and many other amazing things take shape because of his skill. My father was my hero, and I see the same wonder in the eyes of my own sons, Alexander and Rufus. I'm not a rich man, but God has always been faithful to provide for my needs. I hope and pray each day that I'm showing my sons by example how important it is to love and serve the one true God. I often share with them the old stories of how God has protected his people, our people. I especially enjoy telling the story of how God delivered the nation of Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. I marvel at how God killed the firstborn of every Egyptian, but for the Israelites who had covered their doorposts with lamb's blood, he passed over just as he promised. Because of this, Passover has always been a highlight of my year, and I often told my wife that one day I would like to celebrate in Jerusalem. I knew this would not be easy, as it would take a month or more, was potentially dangerous, and it would take a great deal of discipline to lay aside the money necessary for such a journey. But finally, when Alexander was 12 and Rufus was 10, I felt that my family was ready to take this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. 6 weeks before Passover, we boarded a ship that would take us about halfway. Once we reached the end of its voyage, we would purchase a horse and a wagon and would complete our trip on land. I was surprised how well my boys did, given the fact that this was their first time they had gone more than a few miles from our hometown of Cyrene.